It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Sean Haney, your host here on this Wednesday, midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day. Today on the show, we got a great one. Lots of stuff to chat about. Looking forward to talking to Jim McCormick. He is the founder of agmarket.net. Great market analyst based out of Chicago. Go Bears. But we're going to talk about the markets, not the chances for the Bears in the 2024 football season. We're going to talk. I really want to get a handle on where are we at right now and how does that reflect onto your marketing plan in managing risk and trying to optimize profitability. You're concerned with what's happening out in the field, of course, but you're also trying to think about, you got revenue to think about as well. And you can isolate those two and, I'll worry about marketing once I get the crop grown, or you can be a little bit more proactive and do both at once. I think that's, at least paying attention is a key. And so we're going to talk about China. We're going to talk about South America. We're going to talk about what's going on in the U.S. Corn Belt, as well as the Western Canadian and Central and Eastern Canada areas of production as well, and bringing that all together. Jim is fantastic at looking at the big picture. Now, continuing with that theme, we're going to look at some of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index data for April relative to your confidence in your marketing plan. We're going to look at it in aggregate, and then we're going to dive into some of the demographics. How does age impact your marketing plan? How does farm size impact how confident you are in your marketing plan? There's some interesting things and a few contrarian points out there that maybe you wouldn't have, you would have thought it was probably the other way. So we'll talk about all of that. And we have time today for the top ag news stories of the day as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, I'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. A piece of news that I don't think we got to yesterday, but I did get some feedback from you, the audience. And that is that we have a new Deputy Minister of Agriculture at AFC. So Stephanie Beck, no longer the Deputy Minister of Agriculture. This decision was announced over the weekend. It's effective on June 3rd. So Lawrence Hansen, who is currently Associate Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada, has been chosen to replace Stephanie Beck. Beck is moving on to become Deputy Minister at National Defence, where she served as Associate Deputy Minister prior to her appointment to AFC in February of 23. So Beck going back to Defence, now is the lead bureaucrat on that file, and Lawrence Hansen moving over from ECCC to become the lead bureaucrat at AFC. Hansen was he previously served as Associate Deputy Minister in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and an Assistant Deputy at Transport Canada in Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. He holds a bachelor's degree in political studies from the University of Saskatchewan and a master's degree in political science from the University of British Columbia. So he has he's lived in a lot of the country, different parts of the country. A lot of people sending emails saying, hey, what does this mean? Is there a signal here? Him coming from ECCC. Is this more of a push of ECCC's agenda on the agricultural file? I don't know if I would dig that deep into it. Not that I'm in the know. It could possibly also Beck wanted out and wanted to go back to defense because that position opened. Curious a little bit in terms of why the shuffle now by Prime Minister Trudeau in the PMO's office. That is maybe a bigger question on why the shuffle is happening right now in general. But we'll have to get to know Lawrence Hansen and see kind of what he has up his sleeve or his thoughts are when it comes to strategy related to AFC going forward. Remember, there's things like the sustainable ag strategy that sort of felt a little bit of it not finding its way. It's been really kind of stalled out and not really progressing. Hearing rumors of that strategy finding an announcement in the fall. We'll have to wait and see for that. One piece of feedback that I did get was email here from Brian, who says, hey, I fully realize this might be another example of the usual deputy minister on roller skates shuffling between departments that has become commonplace in Ottawa for the past 25 years plus, but note where this fellow comes from. Environment and Climate Change Canada. He may be originally from Saskatoon, but we can be pretty much assured he doesn't have a clue about agriculture. Brian's being really cheapers, Brian. He says, perhaps just another factor pointing to the taking over of the ag portfolio. The name escapes me. Thanks for the email, Brian. I appreciate it. The name escapes me, but the deputy minister before Stephanie Beck actually left to go to ECCC. And so in that situation, it's not like agriculture's influence became this big thing over Environment and Climate Change Canada. So I'm not sure it really works in the reverse, but I can see why people would see it this way. And hey, you very well may be right. This government has, puts the environmental file at a very high priority. It's one of the lead portfolios in the caucus. So this is an opportunity for promotion for the new deputy minister, and we'll have to see if this is a long-term position or another stepping stone to another more prestigious portfolio in agriculture. We'll have to wait and see, and time will tell on that one. Keep your feedback coming. What do you think about the shuffle amongst a number of ministries and who's going to be the deputy minister where? What do you think about Stephanie Beck leaving? Is that a good thing, bad thing? Is it a loss? Or your other thoughts on what do you think about the new deputy minister? I've been asking around, not a lot of knowledge about him. He has not been necessarily high profile, but you wouldn't expect that when somebody is not a deputy minister yet, but we'll have to wait and see what his impact is. Of course, Lawrence McCauley, still the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Hey, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to bring in Jim McCormick from agmarket.net. We're going to talk about what's going on in these commodity markets. It's a head scratcher, hard to figure out, but Jim is definitely going to help us. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch WheatPete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Let's talk markets here on RealAg Radio. We're joined right now by Jim McCormick. He is with agmarket.net. Hey, Jim, it's great to see you again.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me on. Good to see you as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess as you look at the overall ag commodity complex right now, how would you describe where we're at this point here as people are wrapping up seeding and planting for the good part of North America?
Well, it's almost two kind of different dichotomies what's going on. I mean, I think you got to look at it just more like almost in continental type of regional parts around the world. Let's start with the wheat market. The wheat market has just exploded here recently, but that has not really a lot to do with what's going on in Canada or even the U.S. That all has to do with what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine. I mean, first they were dealing with drought issues. And then the Russians got hit with a pretty hard frost. There's still debates on how much damage has actually been done. And now they're dealing with more heat. So the wheat market has really been running more on a situation of how much rationing of wheat maybe have to do in the world market if Russia's crop was really hit. Now, on top of it, you've got a situation going on in India. India has driven its reserves, its domestic carryout to like 18, 19-year lows. And what's happened, Sean, is the president of India has in essence been dumping food out of their supplies onto the market to drive down the price of wheat because, hey, guess what? They're in a presidential election and he's trying to keep food prices cheap. So that the wild card I've been watching was, well, what does that actually mean to the international market per se? Because India traditionally doesn't import wheat. So if they would start to import wheat, it could really kind of shift the balance sheets around in the world. And guess what happened today? Overnight, India came out and said they're dropping their tariff of 40% wheat import through the summer. They'll probably put it back on when they try to essentially during the fall harvest of their wheat crop. But right now they're lowering that tariff as a way to bring some wheat in. So if India really gets aggressive buying wheat onto the world market, now you've got a big country with a lot of people to feed that's all of a sudden stepping in and is now going to compete maybe against like a traditional importer, say like Egypt. And it could really disrupt the market and really drive wheat prices into a very higher to very volatile situation. And I think that was partly what's been driving the wheat market up. So the wheat market's got a supply situation that's looking relatively friendly. On the other hand, recently in the grain markets here in the States, we're getting the crop planted, and it does feel like we're kind of shifting away from, we're not going to, rain is hindering the crop. We're not getting it planted to, hey, now kind of more of a rain makes grain mentality. The U.S. government just came out and said, hey, planting progress here as of last Sunday was pretty much right at the 5-year average. So this crop is getting planted, and now we're going to stick at the U.S. balance sheets, which will look a little bit cumbersome without a major weather problem.
Yeah, and as you move that to the north into the Western Canadian prairies, there's a lot more moisture than we've seen in the last 5 years across the bulk of the geography. How soon does the market start to pay attention to if we get the heat and obviously we're going to need some more moisture through the growing season. We're going to be off to a pretty good start here. How soon does the market notice that, wait a minute, production may be a little bit better here than it's been the past number of years?
Well, I think there's a couple things. The first one, we just, we got to get the crop out of the ground. We'll see how it is. I think there's a little bit of concern here in the Midwest. Iowa, one of our bigger corn producing states, they went from incredible. I mean, we had to look at a drought monitor a year ago or even 7 weeks ago. It's amazing how dry they were. They've just been absolutely hammered with rain. It's one of the wettest Mays on record, but they are getting the crop planted. Now, the real question is, what does that do to the condition of the crop? And we don't get our first condition ratings till next week. So I think depending on how this crop ratings look, if this crop looks like it's off to a really good start, the conditions look good to excellent or at or above average, I think it'll continue to start the market peeling away a weather premium at the moment. But then we also, as a trade, we tend to gauge into going that 4th of July week, summer solstice into July. Think about it this way, Sean. Our weather maps go out about 1 to 2 weeks. You get out 1 to 2 weeks after that, it really becomes a stretch. You get out latter part of June, first part of July, and we're not seeing extreme heat, or we're seeing heat with rain, then I think the market just starts to bleed lower. Right now, our latest forecasters are the guys we like to talk to say what they believe is going to happen right now is there is a drought going on. It's not in Canada, per se. The real note everyone's watching is the drought that's going on in Mexico.
Yeah.
They've been very, very dry. Now, the question is that heat going to start working its way up into like the U.S. Rocky Mountains and essentially put an upper level high over the southwestern plains, Arizona type situation? What'll happen is that'll bring rain up over that ridge into the northern part into Canada, swing down into essentially the Midwest, and bring you essentially a warm summer, but a very wet summer with a lot of storms per se. And, that's where the models are starting to hint at. We don't really know where they're going to be at later May into June, summer solstice into July, we should know. And if the weather does cooperate, the balance sheets do look cumbersome. I mean, the U.S. projected carryout is for beans per se is 445 million bushels for new crop. To get there, they raised demand 125 million. And the reason why I think that's a red flag is China has yet to buy one U.S. new crop bean. So that new crop bean carryout may be way understated by 50, 100 million. Now you got a few areas that are still wet in the Midwest. You might even pick up a few more bean acres. So that bean balance sheet is going to be very negative. And if it goes down, it's not going to be just negative for beans. It's going to be negative for all veg oils, canola oil, you name it, rapeseed oil. It's all going to become a problem. So, the weather's going to be the key. But right now, you look at the price of the grain, I would argue beans are probably a little bit overvalued, but maybe holding in there a little bit longer till they get a better handle of what this summer weather looks like.
Yeah, I just pulled up a December spring wheat chart, and you look in 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks, we put $1.20 on that market. So how do we steer through this from a strategy perspective? We've heard a lot over the past 6-9 months about, hey, sell into the rallies, right? Take some risk off the table. I've been hearing more and more producers saying this feels like 2020. What is the right strategy? We can stick with spring wheat. What's kind of the right strategy if you are trying to deal with your marketing for 24 crop?
Well, I think right now the right strategy is you saw how low prices got. Let's just go that way. We've had one heck of a rally. And the difference for a lot of people is, wow, I wasn't making money to maybe I'm now making money. I think the strategy right now is you've got to look at your break evens, your cost of production, be it winter wheat, spring wheat, whatever it is. Say, where can I make money? Am I making money? And I'm going to argue you want to make sure you can lock in, sell it with a profitable level, use Board of Trade or something maybe to re-own it if you're worried about the what if. Because the one thing about the world wheat situation, right now, India crop does look good. I think they're still trying to keep prices down for the election. The U.S. looks like it's going to have a very good crop at this point. Remember, Sean, we harvest the wheat crop 11 months out of the year. There's always a wheat crop coming online. Now, the wheat stocks of exportable countries is getting tighter. There is no doubt about it. But, if the U.S. ends up with a big corn crop, now the corn crop carry-in's a little over 2 billion. The acreage number for the U.S. is around 90 million acres. If we get anywhere close to trend line yields, you're going to build that corn carryout to 2.1, 2.2. So all of a sudden, you've got a big crop, big carry-in, and then all of a sudden, maybe we feed more corn, a little bit less wheat, and all of a sudden that wheat supply situation loosens up a little bit. So when you just look at the overall economics of the risk of the upside to the downside, I'm taking this year as a viewpoint. I think you're better off selling a little bit too early than selling a little bit too late, because the dynamics between where we are in the world, the uncertainty in the world, the uncertainty with what's going on in China. In the U.S., we have a presidential election that is going to get very, very contentious it just is. I mean, the reality is, the way we elect people down here, with the Electoral College, it's going to come down to a couple different states. 10, 15,000 votes may determine who becomes president. And it's going to come down, so the uncertainty of it all could just unnerve the market per se and drive prices lower going into the fall for all commodities as people kind of take maybe a potential risk off approach. So if you have the opportunity to market profitable, I think that's your game plan in 24.
In the U.S., the economy has been tremendously resilient. Not in, even talk of, potential, should there be a rate raise? In other countries, Canada, the UK, Europe, there's a lot more focus on rate cuts. Do those rate cuts, does that lead itself to improvement for commodity demand, or are those really detached?
Well, it does have an opinion. I mean, there's a couple things, if it's kind of the broader spectrum. You cut the rate, the economy keeps moving higher. Like I said, it is kind of funny. Americans are complaining about our poor economy. And as a whole, like you said, our economy is probably one of the better ones of the Western world per se, or even the world in general. But if the U.S. does cut rates, what happens is it does tend to stimulate spending per se. But the other thing it does, though, if you cut that rate, it could start having a negative impact on the dollar. Okay, we've brought a lot of money into the U.S. because of our higher interest rates, as people are trying to seek, money markets and all that. So if that interest rate starts to drop, the dollar will weaken, and that'll essentially potentially maybe on the ag sector stimulate some demand because our products will get a little bit cheaper on the international market, is what would happen if they would cut rates. Right now, the talk in the States is they're going to cut rates. It will probably be in September. But we're really walking a very tough line. I mean, if you ask an average person in the United States, they tell you, oh man, the economy is really not that good. It's just, they're not comfortable about it. And then you say, well, how are you doing per se? Well, I'm fine. We just had more people travel in the U.S. on Memorial Day holiday we just had over a 3-day weekend. We had more people flying on Friday than ever on Memorial Day weekend. We had more people driving on record on Memorial Day weekend. So for a consumer that keeps saying, wow, everything is bad, they are certainly spending like everything's good. And that's what really is making it hard on the Fed to try to figure out what to do with these interest rates, because you're getting kind of two different storylines. But right here, right now, the latest talk is 1 to 2 rate cuts. But if they happen, it'll happen in the latter half of the year.
Yeah. Well, as somebody that was in the Minneapolis airport last Thursday, I can tell you there's a lot of people flying. It was insane how busy that airport was. We're talking to Jim McCormick with agmarket.net. We got more coming up here on Real Ag Radio. We'll be right back right after this.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
We are continuing our conversation with Jim McCormick with agmarket.net. First, I want to mention a notice from the government of Canada that, hey, listen, if you've been doing business with Global Food and Ingredients, Inc., the Canadian Grain Commission has revoked their licenses. They're also known as GFI. So if this company owes you money for grain deliveries, you need to call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. As I mentioned, we're talking to Jim McCormick with agmarket.net. Jim, you mentioned something in the prior segment that I wanted to kind of circle back on, the fact that China has, up until this point, not bought a single bushel of U.S. soybeans. Is it a case of there's a preference here for Argentina, or what are they up to?
All right, there's a couple different arguments as what's going on. Now, part of it is Argentina had that very big drought last year. They've rebounded dramatically. They are selling product cheaper. Brazil has a very big crop. Now, they did take the top end off their crop in the latter part of the growing season with that flooding we saw in the Rio Grande do Sul region. But in general, they've got a good crop. So partly China is doing that. You got to remember, Sean, China has invested a lot of money in South America, in ports, infrastructure, stuff like that. So part of it's trying to get their money back. But the other thing, but they usually traditionally do buy some U.S. product, and they just haven't done it. Now, there's one argument that says they're going more into just-in-time type of situation, just-in-time coverage. Instead of buying 6 months out, I'm just going to buy it as needed type of situation, per se, because their economy is very touch and go. They spent a lot of money recently trying to stimulate their housing market, but their economy is definitely not going in the right direction, per se, according to most accounts. The other argument, plain and simple, is The reality is, under President Trump, when he was president, he put a lot of tariffs on Chinese goods. President Biden came in, he did not relieve those tariffs. He kept them in place. And then here recently, he actually instigated even more tariffs on some China goods coming in the United States, specifically with electric vehicles and stuff like that. So you're looking at a question that is China in a way trying to push back against these tariffs. Because remember, when Trump had the trade war earlier, in the middle of his presidency, when they started it, what China do? China quit buying U.S. beans, and it tanked the U.S. bean market and kind of pulled a lot of the price of beans around the world. And, that's the real question right now. Is China just trying to send a signal per se that they're not happy with these tariffs? And right now, there's enough world supply that they don't have to buy the U.S. product. Now, it's one thing that is interesting, though, with the Chinese in the U.S. It's one of those weird little tidbits we'll be watching. It's kind of like what happened in Europe. Russia invades Ukraine. Europeans slap all sorts of sanctions on Russia, but they still import Russia energy because they already cast that die. The Chinese actually like to buy U.S. soybeans. And the reason why they like to buy U.S. soybeans, it's interesting, is our beans store better than Brazilian beans. So when you see them coming in buying beans off the P&W, if you're in Canada, you hear that headline of China buying off the P&W coast. What usually they're doing is they're buying U.S. beans to put it in the reserves. Now, there was a story out this morning saying China was going to sell 1 million tons of beans out of their reserves. Now, the question is, are we going to see them come in and maybe buy U.S. beans as a way to essentially recycle, get rid of the older beans, or bring in better beans? So we'll see if we can get some of that demand. But right now, it's a little bit unnerving to see that demand. And like I mentioned, if China doesn't come in and buy, our U.S. balance sheets, assuming they will come in and buy, and it could get really ugly. But, one thing interesting about our world right now is we disagree on the size of the South American crop, and we also just disagree on the size of imports from China. So, there's just a lot of uncertainty at the moment.
Where are those beans going then? What are, because, we see we saw this during the pandemic where things move in different directions. Like our overall for soybean exports out of the U.S., which country is backfilling or filling some of that void?
Well, essentially what's happening is we're filling it more with, we're not selling more exports. If you look at the U.S., we keep losing export share to the world market every year. So what's happening is we're switching over and we're now using more and more of it for renewable energy. First it was biodiesel, now it's renewable diesel. We're going to use more and more of it. And for the United States farmer, that's going to be very critical. We build it out because, the fact of the matter is we're going to continue here in the U.S. We're going to continue to lose market share, I believe, to China to South America, to China. Right now, Sean, there is about 90 million acres of ground in Brazil right now. It is not rainforest. It is like shrub ground that just needs the infrastructure and the input of money to get that up and going. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to the corn crop we're planting this year. Yeah. So I think we're going to continue to lose it. So American agriculture, what you're going to see is more and more demand domestically for renewable diesel, but that becomes its own problem per se, because for all my life, we crushed beans for meal and oil was the byproduct. Oil was kind of the ugly stepchild. Like, what do I do with it? Just get rid of it. As we transition over to an aggressive renewable diesel policy, and it really builds out like some people are projecting it will, the real problem is going to be, what are we going to do with all this meal? Because we're going to have an excess supply of meal, and meal is incredibly hard to ship, rail, and that's going to be potentially our next problem here in the United States is what do we do with that product down the line?
Jim, same. I think everybody in this renewable diesel market is talking about this. It's whether it's soybean meal or it's canola meal, it's the same issue. What are we going to do with all of it? And obviously, there's a lot of people looking at the U.S. dairy industry as an example, but that becomes potentially the new export where like you said, it's tough to transport, right? And all the way to China, especially. So the economics of it are going to definitely be a factor.
And exactly, because the other problem you got with China is China has their own, look what China does. I mean, it's a very, China likes to import their own beans. And the reason why they like to import beans, and then they want that secondary. They want to drive that income. They want to make that money, that crushing industry. They want to buy the beans, crush the beans, sell the meal, sell the oil. So they don't necessarily going to want to buy our meal. And the other thing you got to look at, has the China hog herd topped out? I mean, part of the drive of beans and, bean meal in the world was the growth of the China hog herd over the last 10, 20 years. Well, their population has peaked. They've reached peak population. They're going to see more people die. More people are dying than having births every year in China. They don't have a whole lot of immigration in China, per se. So you got to wonder, have we seen that peak curve of demand for protein, per se? So unless you really get that economy to expand and get more people to buy pork, per se, you could see, maybe the demand for pork at least leveling out. So that still becomes the next problems. Who are you going to try to be able to essentially increase the protein demand, which increase maybe the demand for the meal, be it, like I said, canola meal, soy meal, whatever meal we've got out there in the world, which may be in abundant supply, or find a new need for a use for it, per se.
Overall, though, are you in 24 here? Are you optimistic about the veg oil complex, soybeans, canola alike?
Right now, I'm a little bit pessimistic right now because I think in general, like I said, we're going to overproduce here in the United States. The veg oil market, the canola market, and the bean oil market, they all got excited a year and a half ago when everybody's like, look, this renewable diesel, it's going to take off. There's going to be this huge demand for it. And the fact of the matter is, it's coming. It's just not coming as quick as the industry would like. There was years ago they were saying, oh my gosh, we're not going to produce enough beans in the United States to fill that demand for veg oil. And I'm sure, Canada, they're saying that same thing. And then you look at where we are now. And like I said, our balance sheet is growing. It's going to continue to grow. And like I said, that demand's there. And it's the same thing for corn. I mean, we're losing export share to corn every year. Our ethanol market's topped out. We're going to EV. People don't, you may not like it, but the fact is, I believe, they spent billions of dollars building out the EV market. They're not going to go back. Now it's a way of building out this ethanol, turning it into, jet fuel in essence, that aviation fuel. I think they're going to do it, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, you got a problem that if you have good yields, we could overproduce here in the Northern Hemisphere.
Hey, Jim, great stuff. Awesome. Well-rounded discussion as always. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, make sure everybody, you check out agmarket.net. That is Jim McCormick. Okay, when we come back on Real Ag Radio, we're going to continue with the marketing theme. We're going to look at what the Canadian farmer, how they're looking at the market outlook and confidence in their marketing plan from the latest Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index data. You're listening to Real Ag Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
If you only listen to Real Ag Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio. You deal with many uncertainties on the farm. Managing risk should not be one of them. MNP's Ag team specializes in risk management. Visit MNP.ca to learn how you can stay ahead of the game and plan for the unknown. Well, when it comes to the unknown, one thing we know for sure is the markets definitely help us out providing more and more questions all the time. We have seen a bit of a rebound, as we just heard from Jim McCormick from agmarket.net here on Real Ag Radio. But next what we're going to do is we're going to look at, okay, what did you say, the farmer, what did you say about your own confidence in marketing crops back in our April Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index survey that went out? And really appreciate everybody that participated in the survey. We're going to run through a number of slides. For those of you listening on Real Ag Radio, you can also see the visual by going to the Real Agriculture YouTube channel as well. I'll probably post this on realagriculture.com. So as we do every quarter, we asked farmers about their confidence in marketing crops. Now, whether the market goes up, the market goes down, you definitely want to have confidence in your marketing plan, right? So you're trying to manage risk, you're trying to maximize revenue opportunities, and there's a lot of variables in between, as we heard from Jim McCormick from agmarket.net. So let's look at confidence in marketing crops. And first up, we look at the demographics from the standpoint of by farm type. And one of the things that we see is that primarily crop producers much more confident, they are somewhat confident when it comes to the marketing of the crop. The extremely confident group was the 13% of primarily livestock. Overall, though, the bulk of producers right now are in that somewhat confident block, meaning there's a lack of kind of commitment, or they're kind of unsure about how confident they are at this point in time. If we look at that from an index perspective, not just percentages, remember the scale is 0 to 200, okay? What we see is that primarily crops are feeling the most confident about their current marketing plans. Primarily livestock is a 77 compared to primarily crops at 87. And both crops and livestock, the mixed farm, is at 83. Overall, though, they're all below that neutral line of 100. So not a lot of confidence when it comes to the marketing of crops right now from a confidence perspective. When we look at it historically, okay, here you can see in the chart, if you're watching on YouTube, that we've kind of really held in a bit of a narrow band. So if we pick on primarily crop producers, this is, people that are farming just corn, soybeans, or just canola, wheat pulses. What we see is that our band has basically been between 72 and 105 historically, going back to September of 22. If we look back to almost a year ago, so July of 2023, all the way to now, we've basically been between 72 and 92. So confidence has bounced around a little bit, but has remained relatively flat historically over the history of our surveys. The most confident the farmers were about their marketing plans is going back to September of 22. Okay. And we've pretty much slid down from that point. We look at it by farm size, and I'm not going to look at it by the acre, but if we look at it from a farm size perspective, a lot of times I will say that the farmer that is over 5 million revenue is kind of different than everybody else. They look at things a little bit, just a different sort of way. Their attitudes are different. Their behaviors are different. They tend to be a little bit more optimistic. But this is an example where they also stick out, but maybe in a way that you don't think. Currently, if you are to ask farmers, how confident are you in marketing your crops today compared to a year ago, it's the largest farms that are actually the least confident. Now, just slightly, just barely, okay? So over 5 million in revenue is a 79 out of 200. So once again, below that 100 neutral line. Under 100,000 in revenue, all the way up to 500,000 in revenue, also kind of bouncing between that 80 to 82, just slightly above that over 5 million farmer. It's not till you get to the 2.5 to the 5 million revenue farmer where we see the highest of all of our different categories here, who are a 97. So virtually neutral in terms of their confidence in marketing their crops. Maybe you have an idea. I'm not going to even speculate. Why would the farmer that's between 2.5 to 5 million revenue be that much different when it comes to confidence marketing crops than the farmer that is over 5 million? But that's what the survey in April told us. So an interesting outlier there. When we look at it by going to go ahead here to age, always an interesting way to look at all of the data. What we see when it comes to confidence in marketing crops by age is that age isn't really a factor, to be honest with you. The band is basically from 81 to 89. The most confident group when it comes to marketing their crops is the age group of 55 to 64. And the least are the oldest farmers, 65 and above, at 81, and the farmer that is under the age of 35, they're also at 81. Curious, though, is that when we remember last week we talked about current farm financial performance, who was the most optimistic about their current farm financial performance and the future farm financial performance? It was that group under the age of 35. What they're telling us, though, they're optimistic about their financial health, but in terms of confidence in marketing their crops, it's not like they're not standing out. And so obviously they're looking to get some of those financial profits in some sort of other way than just confidence in their marketing plan. When we look at it by region, we look at the index, we see that Western Canada is a little bit more confident in marketing their crops at this time compared to a year ago in comparison to the East. So the West score was 89 and the East score was 80. So not that far apart, both in the negative, both negative towards their confidence, but there's a little bit of separation there between East and West. And historically, that has kind of been the case. The West overall, if you look back on the majority of the surveys that we have done, I'm just kind of scanning this, almost all of them, the West has always been a little bit more confident than the East when it comes to marketing crops. The other thing that I want to tell you is if you want to see the full amount of these or the full slide decks and the comparisons when it comes to confidence in marketing crops, you can always go to RealAgristudies.com or RealAgriculture.com. If you can't find exactly what you're looking for, you can always make sure you send me an email, shaney@RealAgriculture.com. Overall though, if you look at the overall results here when it comes to the confidence in marketing crops, what we're seeing is it's a challenging environment, right? You heard Jim McCormick talk about how, hey, spring wheat is really, has shown some life here. Soybeans have bounced around a little bit more. Jim talked about on the show about, he's a little bit concerned about the vegetable oil complex as one example. We can kind of look historically where we have been with confidence by looking at the overall Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We see how you can see that slide, how things have fallen here. It's the third bank from the right if you're following along online. We have seen the market bounce all over. And so trying to come up with a strategy that makes sense is difficult. When the market is just shooting higher, it's really easy to just hold and sell when I essentially need some of that cash flow. When the market bounces around, it feels like a bit of a falling knife, hard to have confidence in your plan. When you feel like you're always selling at the top and, selling at the bottom and not selling when the market sort of tops out, you always feel like you're on the wrong side of the trade. It can be very, very frustrating. And it honestly, it helps, it pushes you to lose some confidence. And that's not good either. So I think farmers are, as we look at kind of across Canada here and just look at the overall picture, we see confidence in marketing crops is at 85 out of 200. This kind of right now makes a lot of sense to me. And if it was at a 120 or a 150, I think that we'd probably be scratching our heads and asking some questions here. So I think this is a very good depiction when I compare these results versus some of the anecdotes and things that farmers have been saying on the Thursday show on the Farmer Rapid Fire. So if you have any feedback on this, hey, are you confident in your crop marketing plan right now? Do you feel not confident? Would love to hear some of your stories and the why of that. If you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, it would be very appreciated. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to get to the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
You deal with many uncertainties on your farm. Managing risk should not be one of them. MMP's ag team specializes in risk management. Visit mmp.ca to learn how you can stay ahead of the game and plan for the unknown. Also want to mention June 9th through the 11th is the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association's AGM. It is happening in Swift Current. So that's a great meeting. Been to it many, many times. And there'll be some smiles in the audience because grass looking a lot better than it has the past number of years, which is great to see. Great people at that meeting, great issues being discussed. You can find out more by going to skstockgrowers.com. Okay, it's time for the top ag news stories of the day. And up first is an issue that was mentioned briefly yesterday by the Shadow Minister of Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada, John Barlow. The House of Commons Ag Committee makes 10 recommendations to address food price volatility. Now, yesterday on the show, John focused on the Grocery Code of Conduct, how he feels it's kind of being twisted, misconstrued. It's actually to keep grocers in line with how they deal with suppliers, like farmers, rather than necessarily a way to cut food prices or food price volatility. But it definitely, that is, the Grocery Code of Conduct has really sucked up a lot of oxygen. And this whole idea that grocers are unfairly taking margin when, a lot of the math, and including some of the work of this House of Commons Ag Committee, margins are very thin. And John said it yesterday, competition not necessarily really the issue. But so there was a lot of people that testified to the committee, a wide range of stakeholders from grocers to politicians to analysts to academics, federal officials, and the whole gamut. They had 10 recommendations. So temporary foreign workers, that makes sense. Border inspection and quality standards. They want more border. They want more money to hire more border inspectors. Mentioned Bill C-234. Labeling regulations was another thing. Plastic food packaging was another. Food insecurity, of course. Mentioned the Grocery Code of Conduct. Excessive net profits. Once again, looking at monopolies or oligopolies and those sectors inside the supply chain. Legislative changes when it comes to competition rules was another, and just outright increase in grocery sector competition. Hard to do, though. That's one where the federal government, Cody Boyce is the chair of this committee, from MP from Kings Haunt, Liberal MP. He gets agriculture. This is one I would probably challenge them on in terms of who are you bringing in? We've heard Minister Champagne talk a lot about how he's recruiting grocers, to come, and he's all these different countries, and it just seems like an empty promise. So I don't know how. It's a pretty competitive sector already. That's one of the reasons why you're not seeing a lot of entrants coming from outside. It's very competitive. In other news, Ag Growth International has turned down a takeover offer after a stock price drop. Now, this story was in the Globe and Mail, and the story does not. I have reached out to AGI to see who the potential buyer was. There's a whole list of potentials out there, including hedge funds you've never heard of, and ones you have. But Ag Growth International recently rebuffed an unsolicited takeover offer made in the wake of a slide in the Winnipeg-based farm equipment manufacturer's share price, a sign of the challenges facing a mid-sized player in an agricultural sector dominated by far larger companies. The board at AGI turned down a bid from an industry rival priced at 35% plus premium to where the company's stock is trading. According to a source familiar with the process, the source declined to name the potential buyer, and the Globe and Mail is not naming the source because they were not authorized to speak for the company. So in other words, somebody's got really loose lips. An AGI spokesperson had no comment on reports of offers for the company, which sold $1.5 billion worth of crop and fertilizer processing, handling, and storage equipment last year. So the story does say competitor. Agco? Sure, there's others, but AGI is in a lot of different pieces of the industry, and has a lot. It's a house of brands. They have a lot of different brands that they are managing. Prime Minister Trudeau is set to go overseas. So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is set to attend the G7's Leader Summit next month in Italy, followed by the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland. That came out in a news release today. Trudeau's focus at the G7 Summit will be on highlighting the importance of democracy, promoting fair economic growth, and combating foreign interference. One would scoff and maybe say, are we doing enough domestically when it comes to foreign interference with elections and things with MPs? And Michael Chong, Conservative MP, he's been pushing for an upping of Canada pushing back on foreign interference. So the Prime Minister's got some domestic work to do there too. Sticking with the federal government, Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is non-committal about matching U.S. tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, but promises a review to protect Canadian industry from Chinese oversupply. We talked about this yesterday with Jim Wiesmeyer for Pro Farmer. It would make sense if the U.S. is going to apply 100 to 200% tariff. President Trump, if reelected, says 200. So if the tariff's going to be 100%, does the U.S. not need Canada to follow suit? Otherwise, we're just going to see a whole bunch of EVs coming from China into Canada down to the U.S. Remember what happened with steel? This is how Canada got 301 steel tariffs put on it by the U.S. was because a lot of Chinese steel was actually getting to the U.S. through Canada. Canada already employs measures, including tariffs, to address these issues. G7 finance officials recently discussed responses to China's industrial strategy in Italy, focusing on the expansion of state-owned companies affecting global mining investments. Orange juice prices have reached record highs due to adverse weather and disease in Brazil. The world's largest exporter manufacturers are considering using mandarins to make the drink as a potential solution. Could we see that would mean we have like a shortage of Japanese oranges at Christmas time. We got a crisis on our hands. Orange juice futures hit $4.92 a pound, nearly double from a year ago, driven by poor harvests in Florida and Brazil, consecutive years of reduced supply of depleted stockpiles, leading to fears of rising consumer prices. And finally, Argentina to begin corn shipments to China in July. We heard a lot about soybean shipments from Argentina and Brazil to China, but the corn as well. Argentina is set to begin corn exports to China by July, following Chinese regulatory approval of 2 GMO corn varieties. This clearance is crucial as it allows Argentina to export these GMO corn varieties to China for the very first time. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Of course, my email is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. We are Real Agriculture on all of them. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. Of course, that number is 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll talk again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.